Welcome to Michiana Outdoors. I'm Louis Stout, and with me today is Greg Mangus, arguably one of the best fishermen to ever come out of the Michiana area. In addition to being a top tournament angler, Greg is also a lure designer, and you may have heard of his Sea Flash crankbaits, probably one of the hottest baits in this area for fishing Michiana. Greg, I know you've become quite the expert on crankbaits, and I think I taught you everything that I know.
You're the one that really got me interested in them, Louis, back in the day when we weighed in two big ones, as I remember, and everybody asked me how I caught them, and you caught them on cranking, and that got me going.
Yeah, that was a fun time. Well, you were explaining to me a little earlier about the way guys need to recognize what crankbaits work best in our type of water around grass and stuff. So why don't you get into that? I thought that was really interesting.
Okay, one of the keys for crankbaits, most of our lakes are natural lakes, so they're very weedy. Wood can be a factor too, but some of the properties that really make a good crankbait in natural lakes is a bait that will blow weeds good, and it'll also be able to fish through the weeds by cleaning itself and not catching weeds. One mistake that a lot of guys make is buying a crankbait. If you look at a lot of crankbaits, where the line tie is compared to the bill, there'll be a deep notch. As soon as a crankbait like that hits a weed, it's done, because the weed's gonna stick right in that V. You want to fish a crankbait where there is no V. Here's a Strike King, can be a very good weed bait. A balsa bait or a foam bait that's very buoyant really fishes through weeds excellent. And also they'll have more of a tendency when you hit a weed and rip it, it'll clean itself of the weeds because it doesn't have that area where they're just going to wrap around the crankbait.
That's a good point. That's something I hadn't even thought about. And one of the advantages of let's talk a little bit about your Sea Flash crankbaits. They're made of foam, and they do have some of those characteristics that you say you want in a crankbait. So talk about some of the baits that you have that work really well in our waters.
Okay. The most popular size in the Sea Flash basically are the 22 and 44 size, and these are very buoyant baits. In the 22 mag, it has a long bill, so it'll fish through wood real good as well as weeds. And a 44, most all of the Sea Flash baits, because they're foam, they're very buoyant, so high floating. And if you can literally walk these baits through wood, over the top of weeds, and when you stop them, the 44 will actually back up and swim at the same time. That can be a real trigger. Another trigger is when you hit the weeds, rip it, and because of the design, most of the time the bait will clean itself of weeds, especially with hard weeds now. And another thing that you can do with crankbaits, if you're fishing and where the weeds come close to the surface, fish a crankbait on mono, hold your rod high, and you can literally, I have caught them on the square bills where the weeds were only a foot to 6 inches below the surface. They're very versatile bait for that reason. Now the hard baits, the plastic baits, especially the steep divers, which still, with a design like this Strike King, are good in weeds. But one exception is when a bait dives at a steep angle, that's another case where it's going to bury itself easier in weeds.
Okay. And is there a time of year that the Sea Flash works better than others? I mean, is it strictly a warm weather bait?
No, they can be very good pre-spawn. When they're setting up off the breaks, you use the deeper ones, or once they move onto the flats, the square bills, the 22s. A lake like Wawasee, where it's got deeper flats, you can catch them all year on any of them up on top of the flats, or any one where there's a deeper flat. Shallower flats, of course, you go to the square bills and things like that, and match the bait fish. Shad colors for shad lakes,
Okay.
bluegill colors, which the bluegills is the #1 selling color in the sea flash line.
It's my favorite. I've actually caught them on them, folks, so if I can catch them on the sea flash, they got to be good. Greg, where can we get these baits?
Several dealers: DNR Sports, Allen Bob's, H2O Tackle, the Angler in Helmer. There's a few more dealers out there, but those are some of the bigger dealers around.
And let's remember, these are handmade by Greg Mangus himself, hand-painted.
Should mention the Tackle Shack as well,
Okay.
since it's locally here.
Like I said, handmade, hand-painted. They're very specialized, and when the season starts fishing, you better buy them before then, because Greg's going to be fishing and not making baits, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
All right, that's it for Michiana Outdoor News. Pick you up a sea flash, check it out, and remember some of the things that Greg shared with you here.